Piano 101 podcast. In this episode, we're going to talk about the notion of overteaching. Is it a thing? Does it exist? And if it does, what are the symptoms of it and what is the cure? So, Michael, you begin. Do you believe that overteaching is a thing? Does it exist?
Yes, I think so. I think in a general sense, I do think there is a danger of, especially an enthusiastic piano student, that as much when he or she wants to consume all these wealth of information, takes takes too many information, and I think that just ends up confusing himself or herself. I mean, not the only one of my favorite analogies to use was that famous story from Aesop's fables, where if I can remember correctly, a man and his son went to the market to sell the donkey. So I'm sure you know the story. So the man and the son took the donkey to to the market to sell the donkey. And as they're walking, they bumped into a guy. And then the guy on the street says, "What are you guys doing with the donkey?" And the guy says, "Well," and the man says, "Well, we're going to market to sell the donkey." Then the guy says, "Oh, you should make use of the donkey. Maybe one of you guys should sit on the, a donkey." So at first, if I remember correctly, the father sits on the donkey, and then as they're walking, along, they bumped into a bunch of women who says, "Oh, look, what a disrespectful man! How can he make his son walk?" And then he sits on the donkey, and then the son ends up sitting on the donkey. And then as they walk, then they saw another bunch of people who says, "Well, look, what a disrespectful, like child, how can he be sitting on the donkey while his poor dad's walking?" And both of them sit on the donkey. And by the time the donkey gets to the market, donkey was so tired that they, excuse the pun, made a complete ass of themselves. So I think there is that. I think at the end of the day, each of us are different. I strongly believe in that, and each of us are unique. We all perceived musical passage or musical conundrum very differently. Some of us see it from an interpretive point of view. Some people approach it from a more physiological point of view. Some people approach it from a narrative point of view. For me, one of the strengths of a great teacher is to be able to be open-minded enough and to be creative enough and to have the patience enough to sit down with the students to work out something that works for the student, not to have a cookie cutter,
Yeah.
how to cookie cutter methodology that says that if it doesn't work, then you can't play the piano. If this doesn't work, you can't do this, then you can't play Chopin ballads. I hope I'm making sense.
Oh, totally. I completely agree. Um, I think that a lot of the danger lies, and I've seen this when I've been on piano courses, that people sort of they take the teacher's word as gospel. And I mean, we've talked about this a lot in these podcasts and in our other conversations, that there's a tendency to believe that the teacher is their word is the last word, that they know everything. And this a kind of sort of worship almost. And I think it then gets in the way of being able to sort of sift through the information that you're being given. I've noticed this particularly where people go on courses where they are taught by several different teachers during the course. I mean, some of the big piano courses are organized like that, and you can have access to a number of different teachers. And while this might be fantastic because you're getting different perspectives on your music, I think that if you are not able to sift through the information and take what's useful and discard what isn't, if you just think I must follow every teacher's advice, then you are I think at risk of suffering from being overtaught, even though you may not think you are. You might think that you're being given all this incredibly useful information. I think also another symptom of it is just an over dependence on a teacher. I mean, I think that once you get to certainly an early advanced level, perhaps even a bit sooner, you should be able to start making your own judgments. And not rely on teachers' opinion all the time. It's hard. It's very hard to liberate yourself from that. I mean, we both know people who suffer a bit, as it were, from a sort of over dependence on teachers' advice. But I think that when you're able to step back and make your own judgments, that's when you really start learning as well, because you're self-teaching, you're discovering, you're making your own decisions. And I think that the best teaching then comes when you can interact with your teacher and discuss things and say, look, I encountered this issue when I was practicing. I tried this solution. What do you think? And it becomes a much more equal discussion. And that, I think that's where, you know, the best kind of learning comes.
I completely agree with you, but it's also, I don't want to be treading on toes, and I have to be quite sensitive about saying this, but a lot of what you've spoken about is also a lot of what classical music's own doing or own problems. If you don't mind me being direct here, I think it's fantastic going on musical courses and to have master classes with great pianists, but you have to remember these great pianists or these great teachers are telling you things that, in the spur of the moment, not spur of the moment, they only know you for that short time, that 45 minutes. They don't know you from before. So they're only telling you what works for them or what they think, like works for their students, especially in concert pianists. A lot of concert pianists might be fantastic players, but a lot of what they say might not necessarily work for you because you are different from them. But of course, the danger is to say, because I've been to a class with so and so and he says that I should do it this way, then I have to do it this way because it's got him to that level, blah blah blah. I hope I'm making sense in saying that. And of course, there is a lot of snobbery also in classical music, and I think there is that notion of that weight of tradition that's been passed down from generation to generation, that I've been taught by so and so from this institute, from that institute, and this teacher has a tie with, goes all the way back to Beethoven, and what he says or what she says is the truth. I have to do this. If I don't do this, then it's the wrong way of playing. And I've seen this, especially when students of mine, or not students, or people that I know that worked with, went on to master classes with concert pianists that plays on the circuit. Oh, it's such an inspiring master classes. I'm sure it is that sort of stuff. But it doesn't necessarily sort of means that. I think you know what I'm trying to say, even though I'm finding it difficult to say it. It's Friday. I'm quite tired.
I think, yeah, I agree with you. And I think the weight of tradition and the orthodoxy surrounding classical music in particular, and the teaching of it, still we're up against it. We're still up against that gilded cage, as it were, the snobbery. I don't, it seems to just keep on going. However many people try to break it down, we still have it. It's still there. And I was actually talking about this with another pianist teacher this morning. And he made a comparison to the kind of attitudes that surround amateur cooks, where it's, and I belong to a group on Facebook for amateur cooks, and these are people that are cooking at a similar level to my piano playing abilities, and there's a completely different attitude. It's, one's not governed by orthodoxies or so such and such chef says you must do it like this. It's much more open-minded, much more willing to experiment, and actually a lot more encouraging as well. It's a completely different attitude, and I think we need some of that in piano teaching and music teaching. How we get there, I don't know. Well, I do know, actually. We have teachers like you, and when I was teaching, I think to who are open-minded and don't believe that they have all the right answers. I mean, we've both had experiences many times where a student has made you stop and think, and question something or suggested something that is eye-opening and revealing, and that kind of attitude is what we need more of, not this kind of straight-jacketed, you must do it like this is the only way. Yeah, I think it can be very harmful for students. I think it robs them of confidence and imagination.
Yeah.
And I think it takes quite a leap of faith, actually, as well, to step back from that and to say, no, this is I'm trusting my musical instinct here. I think I'm going to do it like this. If it doesn't work, well, I'll try something else. In fact, we talked about this, didn't we, by messenger earlier yesterday, about the notion. It's like medicine. Medicine is not an exact science. You know, a doctor is not going to necessarily have the answer to what's wrong with you in one go, which is why, you know, you undergo tests and what have you, diagnostics. And I think that the same applies to music teaching and piano playing. It's not an exact science, not by any means. And that kind of, I think, encouraging that kind of attitude is really important.
I have a confession now, and I'm going to say this to our viewers out there. I was not like this when I started off teaching 20 years ago, 25 years ago. It's either my way or the highway. Then I realized very quickly that something's not right. You know, I have to look within myself, and something has to change. I was obsessive, very neurotic. I have to control every phrase that my student play, you know, every gesture, you know. But I find that it's a wonderful, what you said about trust, liberating feeling when you trust your students. It's like a coach, a sports coach that takes drill and talks about gameplay, but then on the match day, he or she allows the team players, the team members to play because he trusts them to express themselves. And then when that comes off, it's absolutely incredible, and it's very liberating to see.
Can
I always say that I'm here to teach my students, but I'm also here to learn from them. And thirdly, what you say about diagnostics, you know, diagnosis, you know, when I was again, I don't want to go into too much detail because this is not about me. You know, when I was at university, I was given a long list. Michael, you have technical problems, but you have musical problems, you have interpretive problems, you have rhythmic problems. And I have thought that by going through these checklists of problems, by doing this, doing the studies, you know, doing this and that, these problems will disappear. Actually, they don't really. I mean, if you have rhythmic problems, the easiest way to solve rhythmic problems is to go and play music with other people. That's the most easiest way to engage with other human beings, you know? If you have interpretive problems, okay, whatever that's supposed to mean, you have to remember that no two interpretations perfect. Even some of the greatest players in the world plays questionable performances now and then. What exactly do you mean by interpretive problems? You have technical problems. Okay, maybe that's tension. How do we go about solving that? So it's not as straightforward as these diagnoses. That's musical diagnosis that some teachers, including myself at one stage, I'm ashamed to say, they're just very keen to give. You know.
So do you think your the attitude which you describe, did that come from your own experience of being taught as a student? Do you think that's where it came from? I'm curious.
I think without sounding and this is not a dig or a disrespect to all my previous teachers, because I owe them, because without any of them I would never be the musician or the pianist or the person that I am today. But I think partially it's culture. I think in the Eastern culture, you are asked to revert and look up to your parents, look up to your teachers especially. You know, I mean, if you watch those old martial art kung fu movies, your mentor, your teacher exert far greater influence than your parents. You know, that's sort of the sworn and undivided, you know, that sworn loyalty that you have to the teachers. Whatever, you know, we all know him. Whatever Graham said to me at one point, that was all, you know, it was the gospel truth, you know, until he actually had to turn around and say to me, look, Michael, you know, this sort of attitude is unhealthy. You know, when you go up stage to perform, you know, don't play for anyone but yourself. You know, it's hard enough playing the piano. Don't feel that there is an obligation to play well so that you can make me proud. I'm proud of you regardless of what, you know, that sort of stuff. It's all that unnecessary pressure that I put on myself. But it's also that like you said, but mainly it's the tradition of classical music that, we are in an art form where we are always against the weight of tradition. When someone tries to think outside the box, whatever, you are instantly discarded. Look, and I'm not talking about playing. I always go on about this. I'm not talking about playing a piece quarter speed and think that's the gospel. I'm not talking about that, I think I'm talking about subtle things like the way you play a slur, the way you take, time towards the end of a phrase, or the way you do certain things, or the way maybe you arrange a certain passage, for hands. I mean, I saw a clip of Beatrice Rana, the Romanian pianist, playing the Hammerklavier the other day. Now, instead of jumping, the first tam tam, she has the B flat major chord in the right hand already, and she plays the B flat with the left hand here in position. Then she plays with the B flat, bottom B flat with the right hand. So she does ta-dam, ta-dam, that sort of stuff. I've not seen that before. It is possible, but some teacher would frown upon that, say that, well, actually Beethoven wanted that. I mean, I personally think Beethoven, that is part of the gesture, but each to their own. Who am I to tell her, what's right and what's wrong? If you don't like someone's performance, then don't go and watch them. That's as simple as that's the most simplest thing, Anyway.
No, I think that's a very good point. I mean, there is a kind of tradition around that opening, isn't there? That it should be taken with one hand. I'm for some
And
people,
also the metronome marking, that is the biggest controversy as to what the piece is about. Yeah.
But for some people that's just not possible. You haven't got it's not physically possible or comfortable. And if it's not physically possible or comfortable, you're not going to create the right effect, are you?
No.
Because you're going to be tense or anxious about hitting them, landing correctly and things like that. So I think again, the issues like that need to have a personal solution, as it were, one that fits the pianist, not the one that tradition says you must play it with one hand in a single gesture.
Wait. Yeah, sorry to interrupt, Francis. Something just came into my mind. But it's not only that. A lot of teachers will be very keen to say to you, because you can't do it that way, then you're not allowed to play the Hammerklavier.
Yes.
Because you can't do it that way, you're not allowed to play Chopin's Fourth Ballade. Which, excuse the language, it's bullshit, really, because I believe that music as written, they're supposed to be played. I don't mind if a student comes up to me and make a complete hash of the Pathetique Sonata or the Moonlight Sonata, whatever, that I can say, okay, right, this is what you worked on. It's not quite what I hear the pieces, but I can work with that. Let's try. As opposed to have a student who doesn't practice.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, that's going back to this idea of sort of respecting and revering teachers. I had quite an interesting experience with a very nice teenager that I taught for some years, who unfortunately suffered from a rather overbearing mother, which made this girl anxious. But one Christmas, she came after Christmas holidays, she came for her first lesson, and she opened a book of Debussy and played the first section of Clair de Lune, having taught herself over the Christmas holiday. And she turned to me when she'd finished and she said, "I hope you don't mind, I learnt this without you." And I felt like hugging her and I just said to her, that what you have done is brilliant. And she said, "Oh, it's not quite right, is it?" I said, "What you have done is brilliant, because you've learnt hugely more by doing it yourself." And actually, she played it very well. And she had worked out some of the issues, which there are quite a lot in that piece. She'd learnt from it. And I would never say to a student, "You must only play what I tell you to play," and things like that. You want to encourage them to pick up music and learn them, teach themselves, as it were.
Yeah.
And I think it's a mark of a good teacher when a student is able to do that. I mean, I remember as a teenager being given a set of the Schubert impromptus by my mother when I was about 13, and I couldn't really play them. I could play quite a few of the Moments Musicaux at that age, but my then piano teacher, this was my second teacher, she never said, "You shouldn't be playing this, you're not good enough." She just said, "Let's find a way through it." And then I came back to that music as an adult, and you know, there was a lot still there from that experience. And I think it helped a lot actually, with my confidence at that time, just being
I
told
am,
it's fine.
yeah,
Yeah, just
yeah.
do it. It's
Going
fine.
back
To
to
this idea of over teaching, what do you think the cure is? How do we cure it from a point of view of both the student and the teacher?
Oh my word. Um, stop listening to what everyone says, and then try and work things out for yourself. I guess that's the obvious thing, because you also have to remember that every teacher has or some teacher has a set methodology of how to approach certain things. So they will say that, okay, fine, there are 5 things I would like you to develop in your playing, but we are going to like tackle the problem 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then you go to another teacher, the teacher says, I agree that these are the 5 things that we should look at, but we're going to look at these, conundrums 3, 2, 4, 5, 1. Am I making sense? So, so each teacher is very, very different. So look, for me, my biggest teacher was actually listening to my own recordings and hearing myself play and following the score. And then to see if something's not right. And then I would, try something else and re-record myself. I know it's quite a, sort of dreary process and a time-consuming process, but that's how I learned to be critical of myself and learn to be independent.
I think that's a very good point. I think recording oneself is one of the best.
Hello, Fran?
Yeah. Hello. Hi. Hello.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you. Hello?
I'll
Yeah.
try and I'll try and cut these bits out.
Yes, I can hear you. I don't know
Hold
what's
on.
going on.
I'm just opening the door. I've had some trouble with my internet connection over the last few days. It might be that.
Okay, there you go. You're back. You're back. You're back.
Yeah, going back to what you've just said, recording oneself, and it doesn't have to be, a polished performance by any means. Even just recording sections, it's one. I think it's the best way of self-teaching and self-critiquing. It's not easy. I mean, I've always found playing to the recording device more anxiety making than playing in a concert or playing for other people in a masterclass situation, for example. I don't know why it is, but just that device there next to the piano can be very disconcerting. But I think it's a brilliant tool, and I think everybody should be doing it, regardless of the level at which they play. And of course you hear things differently, don't you, when you listen to a recording? You're coming at it with a different set of ears almost. And that's such a useful thing to do. I think also another way of curing over teaching is perhaps making a decision to change teachers if one feels that the teacher is too controlling, too didactic. Then maybe it's just time for a change. And then I think on the subject of piano courses, I think the key thing is to go into these things with an open mind and a willingness to learn from others and listen to others, but also to just say, if I don't agree, it's fine. It's fine. It's absolutely fine if I don't agree with this person's point of view. And you don't have to sit at the piano and argue with the teacher. You can just take it in and then go away and consider these things. But not end up like someone I met on a course who had played the same passage of Schubert to, I think, 5 different teachers, some of whom were very well known and renowned. And we were having a drink at the end of the day in the bar, and he said, I just don't know which version to play now. And I thought that really kind of summed it up for me. I don't know which version to play. And I said, well, why don't you play the one that you feel is truest to who you are? And he just kind of looked blankly at me. And that's the point when I thought, yeah, this is an issue and it needs to be addressed.
Well, another thing that I want to say also, it's recordings are fantastic tools to listen to, and they are great catalogs to show us the artists in the 20th and the previous century and the century before, but it's a dangerous thing, to try and copy recordings.
Oh,
Don't, one of the mistakes that I made when I was teenage years was trying to copy Martha Argerich. And I just wish if I have the, sort of you know, a time machine to go back, I'm just going to say to the young Mark Michael, don't do that. And that's why there was so much tension in my playing back then, before I got help. It doesn't have to go, the Prokofiev toccata doesn't have to go that fast. And those octaves in the Sixth Hungarian Rhapsody doesn't have to be that clean. Not even Horowitz, the great Horowitz, got them that clean. Um, but I completely agree with you. It is this business of teaching of students looking up to teacher, and also this links in with what the with the way we live our life. I don't want to get too philosophical, but there is a fallacy, and I meant this in the nicest way, a fallacy that we are all safe, or the world is a better place if when we all believe or when we all agree on the same thing, which is absolute nonsense.
absolutely.
And that's why you see people who goes on social media and argue, stand up for their favorite pianists and then all this sort of stuff. I mean, why? You might as well go and argue to someone about their football teams. It's all opinions. So what if you think Manchester United is the greatest football team in the world? So what if you think Arsenal is? I just want to watch the match and have a good match.
Well, that goes back to taste, doesn't it? Which is another
Yeah, of
subject
course.
we covered. That yeah, we all have our favourites, and we admire particular football players or sports people or pianists for different reasons, and that's what makes it interesting.
Exactly.
Continuing on the subject of over teaching, how do we encourage independent learning and encouraging students to kind of become immune, shall we say, to self-teaching, to over-teaching? How do we encourage them to kind of cure themselves, as it were?
That is a difficult one. I think it all depends on the individuals really. I mean, some students are a bit more musically a bit more naturally curious, so they would do things in their own accord and go and read music. Some you would needs a bit more of a nudge. Some you need to crack the whip. So there is no right answer, to be honest with you, or no, we all know there's no right answer, but I can't really give you an answer to that one. And it's also because that for me, Fran, I still to this day, the biggest challenge that I find in my teaching is to try and get my students to practice. Because for me, practicing and going to sit on the piano and practicing for 2-3 hours a day, 3-4 hours a day, that for me is the most natural thing to do. I have to do that every day. And because something that comes so naturally and easy to me, I find it very difficult to articulate it, to put it into words, to tell someone how to do it. Am I making sense?
Yes, I completely understand.
Yeah, yeah.
I think too that we set ourselves very high standards. I know you do, and when I was working seriously as a pianist, less so now, I did too. And something that I found very difficult in the sort of early years of my teaching was that, and I had in a way a similar attitude to you because of the way I'd been taught in the 1970s and 80s, which was, generally quite an old-fashioned way, and that, teacher was right kind of thing. I found the fact that my students didn't practice as much as they perhaps should have been, or in a useful and productive way as they should have been. I did struggle with that for a long time, and I had to set slightly lower standards because, of course, these are kids that have lots of other things going on. They haven't devoted their entire life to learning to play the piano, and some of them, because of the area where I lived at the time, also had this whole rota of activities all through the week. And piano lessons was just one part of it. So I think something that I found very useful was basically just cutting them a bit more slack, and not getting too worked up if they came
For
to
your own sanity, I agree with that.
yeah, exactly. Because otherwise, I'd come to the end of a teaching session and just feel frustrated and angry because so and so hadn't done any practicing. I mean, the child that doesn't progress week by week, that they're not taking in what you're telling them or asking them to do. I don't like saying the word tell; it's too didactic. So that helped me and stopped me from being too controlling a teacher. And the other thing that I did to encourage their independence was, instead of me writing in the practice notebook for the tasks for the week, I would get them to write it down. So
Oh, wow.
and
That's a good idea.
even the quite young kids, the early learners, and we, after we'd finished working on the piece, we'd talk about what I felt and they felt needed to be done in the week between lessons, and I would get them to write it in their notebook. And I think the act of writing things down, well, this is known, taking notes by hand helps to fix that information in the brain. And I think that helped them. I also think it was very empowering for them because it was their notes in their notebook, not mine. And I think things like, quite simple things like that, little changes like that can really help get past this sort of a tendency to be an overbearing teacher, and to make a student feel more independent, more autonomous. And I firmly believe that we should be doing this with students of all levels, not just advanced students. Any student is deserving of that kind of respect from a teacher and that kind of encouragement, because if we're doing that with the young ones, the little kids and the teenagers, we're also giving them quite an important life skill, which is a sense of personal worth and autonomy. And I think that there are other aspects in school life, for example, in this country, where those kinds of values are being undermined, where kids are expected to conform, and it's kind of tick box education. And I didn't want to be that kind of teacher.
And also trust is, I think is the big word here. Also, you trust your students, I mean, I would show my students how I would practice a passage, or how I think they should practice a passage. But my philosophy has always been, if you have another way of doing it, and then we get to the same result in the end, do it your way. I'm not particularly fussed.
I think that's a brilliant point. It's also a good point on which to end, Michael, because we're running out of time. So just in the last few minutes, as ever, we should consign a few things to Room 101. So what are you sending to Room 101 today?
Marta Argerig's recordings.
Oh.
No. I'm just kidding. Of course, I would never do that. She's one of my favorite pianists of all times. But this notion of the teacher is always right. I think the teacher is there to help you, but they also they need to be respected, but they also need to be challenged from time to time.